So, I believe we left off chapter 6. So, chapter 7, the Slug Club. When Harry last spoke with Dumbledore at the Burrow before Dumbledore left, what did Dumbledore warn him about Slughorn? Anybody remember?
He likes people with like a reputation, a good reputation.
Okay. What do you mean he likes people?
Like he wants to get close to people that he feels like can have connections in the future, or people that he sees potential in.
Okay.
And he warned her that he would definitely try and get close to him.
Right. What I'm trying to get at is what does he do with those people? How does he treat them, etc.? It's kind of given away with the title of this chapter. He gathers them around him, right? I mean, in one sense, and this is going to be a crazy analogy. He's kind of like a serial killer. What is, if you watch crime dramas at all, this comes out very, very quickly. Or if you read the news and you read anything about serial killers. I grew up with one down the street, about 4 houses from me. I didn't grow up. I mean, he lived there for about 2 or 3 years. What is a characteristic of almost all serial killers? Anybody know? Okay, some. That's not unique to all, or that's not characteristic actually of all of them. Because usually they're losers. That's a defining characteristic. They keep trophies. That is, they keep something of the people they kill. It might be something the person wears, or it might be a part of the person. Finger, ear, things like that. Fingernail or fingertip, toe. Get online. Don't get online. Just take my word for it. Okay? That's kind of what Slughorn's doing. Kind of. That's why I said the analogy is kind of extreme. He gathers these people around him for what purpose? Describe the individuals that he gathers around. Describe the individuals that we meet, for example, in the Slug Club. Hold on. +5. Beginning around, I don't know. Beginning around 141 or so. Okay, Harry's gotten the note from Slughorn. He says, meet me in my compartment, etc., etc. Harry goes there, and we see a bunch of people. Okay, what characterizes almost all of these people? Louder? Okay, they have connections, some, not all of them, right? Who does Ginny have connections with? Her father. Big deal, because he's a loser. Well, Harry, all right? Who does Cormac McQuaggan? Who does Cho? Who does, okay? So some of them have connections. What about the others? They're particularly adept at something, right? Why is Ginny in there?
Because she's really pretty and hacks somebody really well.
Okay, pretty maybe. I mean, she is pretty. It's her, what is it, the double bogey bat hex that we're told you don't want to mess around with Ginny, right? Harry, obviously, because he's Harry Potter. So Dumbledore warns him about that. Why? Is it dangerous? Is it dangerous to be part of Slug's club? Is it going to ruin his reputation, so to speak? Not necessarily. I'm not asking the question as if there's a correct answer. I'm just throwing this out there. Because what does she do, Rowling? What does she do with the quote-unquote Slug Club later on? Anything happen with/to it? Does she take it anywhere else? Do we find out, the members of the Slug Club are in some way tainted by their association with him? Not really. It's all about what? Ultimately, one man's vanity. He wants to surround himself with these people because it makes him what? Feel important. As if the job that he had prior, when he was a professor at Hogwarts, etc., wasn't enough. Or the job that, Dumbledore brings him out of retirement now for wasn't enough, right? But, let's see here. I have no idea what those are for. What's the real importance of this chapter? Is it the Slug Club? Is it Harry seeing, who's in the club and such? No. It's what comes at the end. Harry follows Zabini from Slughorn's and gets into the compartment where Malfoy is, into the carriage where Malfoy is. And he overhears Malfoy talking, and Harry's, in the luggage rack, covered up with the invisibility cloak. And we're told around 150, 151 maybe, Harry was not afraid of Malfoy, but he still did not much like the idea of being discovered hiding under his invisibility cloak by a group of unfriendly Slytherins. Eyes still watering, head still throbbing, he drew his wand, careful not to disarrange the cloak, waited, breath held. To his relief, Malfoy seemed to decide that he had imagined the noise. Pulled on his robes like the others, locked his trunk, and as the train slowed to a jerky crawl, fastened the thick new traveling cloak around his neck. Harry can see out the glass door, corridors filling up and such. Everybody else goes on. Malfoy tells him, you go on. I want to check something. They all leave. Harry peers down over the edge of the luggage rack. What did Malfoy wanted to hide? Now, what's Harry thinking? What did Harry see in the chapter Draco's Detour? Anybody remember? He saw him going to Borgin and Burke's. He saw him treat Borgin like a slave, essentially, or a very small person. And, has ordered something, has bought something. He wants it essentially, held. He'll manage the delivery later and such. So Harry's thinking he's going to find out what it is, Malfoy's after. What did everybody else, when Harry told them what he saw Malfoy do, what did everybody else, Ron, Hermione, and I can't remember who else, say about it? It's unimportant. It's nothing, It's like Voldemort's going to have a 16-year-old, doing things for him. Okay? And Malfoy uses Petrificus Totalis on Harry, who is instantly paralyzed. Okay, so question. Think about how this is literally described. Okay? So Harry's laying on the shelf above the compartment couch/bed. It's a fold-out kind of thing. And he's lying there and he's looking over, right? He gets hit with this spell that freezes him. So why does he move? Why does he fall? Does he fall because he's leaning way over? We're not told that. See, this is to me, it's a problem conceptually. If he's immediately petrified, then he ought to be petrified right there. He shouldn't fall, but he does. As though in slow motion, he toppled out of the luggage rack, fell with an agonizing floor-shaking crush at Malfoy's feet. Invisibility notice beneath him now. Okay? And he can't move a mouse. All he can do is look up, and there's Malfoy. And what does Rowling give us? She gives us an image that is straight out of George Orwell's 1984. Okay? And it's the image, and Orwell talks about this image. It's the image in 1984 of the party's suppression of the proles, of the commoners, the low people. And it's the image of a boot forever stamping on the face of somebody. It's a common image, to describe totalitarian society. Why does she do this? Because this is the image of Voldemort and his followers. This is what they will do to everyone else. And we see Malfoy stamp hard on Harry's face. Is there any act of, it's a ludicrous question, any indication of grace, mercy, forgiveness, compassion, anything in that?
Hell no.
Hell no. It's utter hatred and contempt. Right? This is showing us how far gone Malfoy is. Does he have to do this? Notice, is he doing it to impress anyone? No, there's nobody else there. We're seeing, to some extent, the heart of Draco Malfoy here. He hates Harry Potter. But he does it for a reason. What's the reason? What does he say? That's from my father. You put my father, it's because of you, his father's where? In Azkaban. And when we later see Lucius Malfoy, book 7, is Lucius Malfoy in book 7 the same Lucius Malfoy that we see in books 1 through 5? Or has he changed? He's a shell of what he was. He's no longer slimy, oily, slick, glib, arrogant. He's what? He's ruined. He's a broken man. Okay? And we see him constantly just suck up to others. He's no longer, the kind of the leader of the Death Eaters. He's now kind of a nobody, all right? So, chapter 8, Snape victorious. What's the Snape victorious refer to? Is it Snape coming down to the gates of Hogwarts to welcome Harry in as Tonks leads him to the gates? Is it Snape, at that point taking 50 points from Gryffindor, from Harry? Could be. What's it really refer to? He finally has the job he's applied for the last, now, 15 years. Defense Against the Dark Arts. Okay? So, So Harry goes up to Hogwarts. Dumbledore gives his beginning of the year speech, 167 or so. Tells them, follow the security restrictions. Don't go places you're not supposed to go. He obviously knows about Harry, the Marauders map, and such. Harry's talking about, Malfoy. Chapter 9, Half-Blood Prince. We're skipping a lot. So, beginning of that chapter, about, 3 to 4 pages in, McGonagall is doing her revisions with students. That is, going over their course schedules. For what purpose? Remember the chapter in the previous book? Career advice? So, she and Umbridge went over with each student what they planned on doing upon graduation. So, when they go over the course schedules here, part of that is aimed to enabling them to attain those goals. Are we told what Neville wants to do? No, we're not. Okay? Anybody know what Neville ends up doing? He replaces Professor Sprout later on. Okay? It's not told in books 1 through 7. I don't think that's in the epilogue. I should make sure about that. Anyways, so she's going over with Neville his owls. And we find out, all the classes Hermione gets to go through. And McGonagall tells Neville, herbology's fine. Defense against the dark arts, fine. Why? Because he exceeds expectations because of Harry's teaching. Okay. Transfiguration. She says, no, Neville, you can't. You got an acceptable from me. You can't go on. You have to have either exceeds expectations or outstanding. He hangs his head. And she's like, why? Why do you want to continue with this? You're no good at it. I mean, she doesn't say that part, but, Notice she puts it, I've never had the impression that you particularly enjoyed it. Neville says something about his grandmother. It's high time your grandmother learned to be proud of the grandson she's got, rather than the one she thinks she ought to have. And notice, she could end the sentence right there. But she doesn't. She pauses. That's why you have space, dash, space. Particularly after what happened at the ministry. Your grandmother should be proud of you, Neville. Why? When you learn, writing and such, one of the things writing, well, I shouldn't say that. When I teach writing, one of the things I emphasize to students is, you kind of want to end a paragraph with the most important idea you want somebody to take away, your audience to take away from that part. Maybe it's a speech, and you have a pause from one paragraph to another one. So you end it on a bang, and then you go on to the next one, etc. She's ending it with a bang. What does she mean? Your grandmother should look at you, Neville, and go, way to go. Why? A 15-year-old taking on fully qualified dark wizards? Who do you think you are, Neville? Well, he thinks he's part of Dumbledore's army. Notice, Neville turns pink and blinks. Professor McGonagall had never paid him a compliment before. I'm sorry, Long. No. Why not try for a newt in charms? Grandmother thinks charms is a soft option. Soft option meaning, I almost said something that I definitely shouldn't say. Something students to take for an easy grade. Okay? Take charms. And I shall drop Augusta. Who's Augusta? His grandmother. Have we been told that? Well, she introduces herself as, I think, Augusta Longbottom in the chapter on the closed ward. Okay? And I shall drop Augusta a line reminding her that just because she failed her charms owl, the subject is not necessarily worthless. Now, there's a lot of information packed in that one little sentence. One, she's on a first name basis with his grandmother. Two, she remembers how his grandmother did in her charms owl. Why? How long has McGonagall been teaching? This is now one more year added after Order of the Phoenix. In Order of the Phoenix, I believe it is, we're told she's been a professor at Hogwarts for 49 years. Now she's been there for 50 years. Okay? She probably taught Neville's grandmother. Okay? Because she remembers how she did in her owl. And just because, she failed. Now, obviously, Hogwarts doesn't have FERPA, Federal Educational Rights Privacy Act. If one of your parents calls me to find out how you're doing, I can say, I can't tell you that, and hang up. Only way I could tell them is if you sign a form saying that you give me authority to share that information. They don't have that. She has just told Neville, you're smarter than your grandmother when it comes to charms. Probably why he did so well at the Ministry of Magic in the Department of Mysteries. Smiling slightly at the look of delighted incredulity on Neville's face. Notice, it's McGonagall smiling because Neville is amazed. My grandmother sucks at charms, and I don't. She taps the thing, and Neville goes off. Okay? Why does Rowling spend essentially about a page on that? I know, it's one page out of, 600 or 700 in this book. It's not that much. But it's something that we begin seeing. Book 5, in one sense, we see it at the end of book 1, and then it's left alone, 2, 3, and 4, and it's picked up in 5. We see this encouragement of Neville. Why? Well, we're going to get to the end of book 7, and we're going to kind of see, I think, and I'm not giving anything away, why the prophecy could have been Neville. Right? It could have been Neville. It comes entirely down to Voldemort rolls the dice. He doesn't actually. There's a reason why he chose Harry as opposed to Neville, which we'll talk about later. Okay? So, she goes over Harry's and goes off to Defense Against the Dark Arts, pages 177, I guess. 176, 77, and such. And there's Snape, Defense Against the Dark Arts, and he gives his little speech, and he talks about, how you've had different teachers over the years, and each of them has kind of had a different focus and emphasis, etc. Naturally, these teachers will have had their own methods and priorities. Okay, let's talk about those. First teacher, Quirrell. Do we learn anything about Quirrell's actual teaching ability / methods, priorities? No, we don't. All we learn about Quirrell is he had Voldemort pasted on the back of his head. Okay? Probably not a good indication. Book 2, Gilderoy Lockhart. Enough said. Book 3, Lupin. Good teacher. All right? Yeah, you got the werewolf problem. Book 4, False Mad-Eye Moody. How is he as a teacher? Yeah, excellent. He's a great teacher, which is really kind of odd. Okay? Book 5, enough said. So, Snape only has what? really one or two to be compared to. Okay? Lupin and Mad Eye. So he starts talking about the dark arts. The dark arts are many, varied, ever-changing, and eternal. Eternal. Fighting them is like fighting a many-headed monster, aka a hydra, which each time a neck is severed sprouts a head even fiercer and cleverer than before. You are fighting that which is, okay, notice, you're fighting that is the dark arts, which is unfixed. It doesn't only reside here. In other words, you can't just go white, black, dark arts, all right? Mutating, it always changes. You know, it's the COVID of Hogwarts. And what? Indestructible. If you think about that philosophically, it kind of means what about the dark arts?
It's combatable, but ultimately unstoppable.
It can't be defeated. Now, you could say that gives rise to a dualist perspective in Rowling's world. Dualist, the yin and yang kind of thing. The thing like this, where you've got good, evil, one doesn't exist without the other, one doesn't exist without the other, neither one is ultimately more powerful than the other, and that all of history is nothing but a battle between them. Right? And they, at some point, the dark rises, Susan Cooper's series, of novels, The Dark is Rising, etc., or the light rises, and sometimes one gets the upper hand, and then it balances out, and etc. I don't know that that's what Rowling necessarily intends, but that's definitely the vibe that's kind of given off here, right? So they continue talking. He talks about the Cruciatus because he's got pictures and stuff. They talk about Inferi. What are Inferi again in our world terms? Zombies. Okay, the undead. Let's see. Let's go on. They go to potions. Harry didn't buy a book because he didn't think he'd be taking potions. So he gets a book from the back of the classroom in the little lending library, so to speak. He gets a little note from Dumbledore saying, we're going to have our first lesson. And the House of Gaunt. House of Gaunt. So, he picks up the book, or he takes the book with him, and it has written in the back, this book is the property of the Half-Blood Prince. What's the problem with that? And who explains that to Harry? Hermione. Prince is what kind of term? It is an aristocratic title. Right? You're born a prince. You cannot be made a prince. The queen can't come up to you and tap you on the shoulders and say, I now dub thee prince, whatever, half-blood prince kind of a thing. It's bloodline, right? We're told they don't have any kind of aristocracy within the magical world. There are no lords and ladies. And yet there's Lord Voldy. But who gave him that name? Yeah, why? Because he thinks he's above everybody else, right? This is a reason why Dumbledore doesn't call him that, ever. He calls him Tom, okay? doesn't call him that. What else do people call Voldemort other than he who must not be named? Like Snape. And Harry asks him directly. He calls him the Dark Lord. Okay, so if there's a Dark Lord, is there a Light Lord? Is that Is that Dumbledore? No. Why? Because that's a misnomer. Lord implies what? Superiority, and those beneath the Lord owe fealty. They owe allegiance to that individual. All right? By having her society, her Muggle society, be in a sense egalitarian, Rowling is kind of trying to show or emphasize possibly, the proper role of democracy or democratization, because even somebody like the Minister of Magic, is that a lifetime role? No. You get replaced, right? Who was up for Minister of Magic before his son turned out to be, somebody in allegiance to the Dark Lord? Barty Crouch. But because of that just association, he was no longer even considered, and it ended up being Fudge. Though we're going to be told the position has been offered to Dumbledore many times, and he's never taken it. So, Harry goes off to his class with Dumbledore. And Dumbledore says, a couple pages in, about 3 pages in, I don't know, about 204 or so, no, about 206, I guess. He says, it's time that you know what prompted Lord Voldemort to try and kill you 15 years ago. Harry's like, I thought you told me that at the end of last year. In other words, what else are you holding from me? Dumbledore, I did. End of last year, I told you everything I know. Okay? Remember when Frodo meets with Gandalf not quite the first time, but they're talking about the ring and stuff. And Frodo asks him, well, how much do you know? And Gandalf's like, shut up, you little puny. No, I know much that only the wise know, but I've only shared a little bit with you. Dumbledore goes on. From here on, we'll leave the firm foundation of fact and journey together through the murky marshes of memory into thickets of wildest guesswork. Harry, but you think you're right. Think about that question for a minute. You're going about you out there, you're going about your daily business, you're having a conversation with somebody, and you're expressing opinions. When you express that opinion, don't you think your opinions are right? How often do you hold an opinion that you believe is false? Well, that's stupid. Of course you believe it's true, right? Dumbledore, naturally I do. But Harry, come on, man. You've got to be a little bit brighter than this. But as I've already proven to you, I make mistakes like the next man. Notice, proven how? The flaw in my plan. Previous book. Okay? Well, that's one mistake. Are there others that he's proven, so to speak? No, not proven. I think, however, there are other mistakes that Dumbledore has said that aren't shown yet. For example, I think his interpretation of entirely what the mirror shows, it's not fully true or accurate. Or the echoes from Voldemort's wand, not totally correct. So he says, but, being rather cleverer than most men, my mistakes tend to be correspondingly huger. Right? Think about it. What made Hitler so dangerous?
Power he had
Keep going.
over the German military, German society, conquering
Okay.
most of continental Europe.
How do you get that?
Clever politicking and lots of speeches that Rowling.
Okay, keep going with that second part.
Okay, so he spoke in a way that was meant to direct the Germans to believe that he was the person who could restore German honor and German pride after it was crushed in the Treaty of Versailles.
In other words, he had what? He had charisma. This is why it is dangerous when politicians have a lot of this. Politicians of any stripe, left, right, center. Because if they have lots of charisma, and notice what this word, you can add charismatic on the end. Okay? You can take this out, and it relates to this word, which is a word in the Christian tradition. Okay? And this part and this part and this part are related to this word. They all imply anointed, chosen. They are people who are given this ability to move others. So, American examples of people with charisma. JFK. JFK had charisma. Ronald Reagan had charisma. Okay? Bill Clinton had charisma. Obama had charisma. Joe Biden has no charisma. None at all. Okay? Lyndon Johnson had no charisma. Jimmy Carter had no charisma. George Bush, read my lips, no elder one. No charisma at all. They couldn't move a room. All right? The others I spoke of could. If you read the speeches, for example, of Abraham Lincoln, lots of charisma in the speeches. Physically, even though he was tall and stuff, he didn't turn people on. He didn't move them in that way. These others did. Stalin did. Hitler did. Mao did. Churchill did. Okay? Voldemort has that charisma. Dumbledore has that charisma. Fudge does not. Hagrid does not. Okay? So, this idea of anointed and chosen is pretty important. So, what's Dumbledore saying there? Because I am cleverer than many, or most, when I make a mistake, it can have pretty big ramifications. People with charisma, when they are on the wrong side, it can lead to dire consequences. Notice, charisma is not the same as intellect. Dumbledore's talking about intellect and such. Okay? So, Dumbledore takes Harry into a memory through the pensieve. And we witness the House of Gaunt, so to speak, and we get introduced to Marvolo Gaunt, his son, Morfin, and his daughter, Maripe. Okay? We see what happens. We see Tom Riddle in page 211. Dumbledore grabs Harry by the elbow and pulls him out of the memory. Okay. Now, describe what we see of Maripe Gaunt's existence experience in this house? You're shaking your head. Why? She's like a servant. That's kind of a benign, fair way of putting it. What kind of servant? Give me an example within these books. She's kind of like Creature. How does Sirius treat Creature? Like Slug. That's how Merope is treated. Remember back, and I mentioned this the other day, back in that chapter, the return of Penfoot in Goblet of Fire, Sirius says, you want to take the measure of a man, see how he treats those inferior to him. And what does Dumbledore kind of do with that at the end of Order of the Phoenix? He holds it up to Sirius. He doesn't know that Sirius said that, but he says Creature is what he is because that is what Sirius and the rest of the Black family made him. Okay? Sirius didn't treat Creature as an equal. Not like Harry treats Dobby when he first sees him. Harry says, have a seat. And Dobby says, I've never been treated like an equal. Right? So, Merope is not treated as an equal, right? She's a slave. Why? Woman? Very possibly. She also happens to be kind of in love / lust / infatuation with, the squire's son and such. So, Dumbledore brings Harry out. Page 211. Notice Harry's first question. What happened to the girl in the cottage? Does he know who she is? No, he doesn't. Merope, or whatever her name was. Why does he ask that question?
He was like him.
Keep going.
He was treated like
She was treated kind of like Harry was at the Dursleys. Okay, why else? What's this showing us about Harry?
His compassion.
His concern is always for those who are suffering. Right? Remember in book 3, he was angry beyond all get out after he hears about what Sirius Black did to his parents. They get back to Hogwarts, and Ron and Hermione are trying to get his mind off of what he heard in the Three Broomsticks. And one of them says, let's go talk to Hagrid. He goes, yeah, let's go talk to Hagrid. No, let's not go talk. And he goes down there ready for bore. And what happens? Hagrid's got tears because he finds out Buckbeak's going to be tried, which means Buckbeak's going to be killed. And he can't have hatred and love in him simultaneously. And what happens? The love wins out. He shows concern for Hagrid. Book 5. He's upset at the end of the book. Sirius is dead. He thinks there's no hope in the world. He's kind of angry because Nearly Headless Nick can't give him answers. He meets Luna, and he turns from his inward problems to Luna's problems, and everything, it's like it just goes away. He wants to know what happened to her. Did she get a happy ending, proverbially? Dumbledore, she survived. And he mentions Marvolo. Harry, Marvolo? I've heard that name before. Dumbledore, yeah, I'm glad to see you're keeping up. In other words, you're not as dumb as I thought you were. That man was, Voldemort's grandfather. Harry's like, okay, so he's Voldemort's grandfather. She's that man's daughter. So she was Voldemort's mother? Yes, I wonder whether you noticed. And that the man on the horse, you had a glimpse of Voldemort's father. The Muggle? Very good, Harry. And then, wait, stop. And those two ended up married? Yep. What has Slughorn been teaching them about? Their first lesson? Love potion. And Dumbledore says, Harry, do you know of any way that he could have fallen in love? And he says, Imperius. She put an Imperius curse on him. He goes, love potion. Very good. Notice Dumbledore, ever the teacher, reinforcing other teachers' lessons. Okay? And he says, from all I've been able to discover, he never mentioned her name or existence from that time forth. That is, he came back about 6 months later. The shock of her desertion may have contributed to his early death, or perhaps he simply never learned to feed himself. Azkaban had greatly weakened Marvolo. He did not live to see Morphin return to the cottage. Sorry, he's talking about when Marvolo returns. Merope, she died, didn't she? Dumbledore, yes, indeed. Notice, you got to do some guessing here. In other words, it's like, doing DNA sequencing, where we have gaps in the double helix. And so when you do DNA sequencing and you want to restore something, and you don't have the full genetic genome, you got to fill in some of those gaps, right? So he talks about the rumors that fled. Bottom of, 211, 212, probably 213, 214. So Dumbledore talks about Tom Riddle disappeared and he came back within a few months. Rumor was he'd been hoodwinked or taken in. Okay. Harry, when they heard what he was saying, the villagers guessed that Merope had lied to Tom Riddle. Pretending she was going to have his baby and that he'd married her for this reason. Harry, but she did have his baby. Yes, but not until a year after they were married. Tom Riddle left her while she was still pregnant. It's always dangerous for me to suggest what I'm going to suggest, but I do it anyways. I've been doing it ever since the book was written. Does anybody know about Rowling's personal experience? Her background? After she graduated from university in classics and French, I believe, at University of Exeter, she couldn't get into Oxford. She went off to Portugal, worked for Amnesty International, right? Where she married a handsome Antonio Banderas, like in his youth, dashing young Portuguese journalist, I think he's Portuguese. Whirlwind romance, like 3 months, married, pregnant, and he left her after about 6 months of marriage. Parallels? Oh, yeah. I don't think you can't help but read or see the parallels. Okay? He leaves her pregnant. She goes back to Scotland. So now she is an quote unquote unwed mother. She had been married, when she got pregnant and such. Has her first child, eldest daughter, Jessica. Okay? Lives on welfare, starts writing Harry Potter novels. The rest of the story is history. Harry, what went wrong? Why did the love potion stop working? Now, it's an interesting statement, which I've never really taken that little part apart before. Because notice there's two questions there. What went wrong? Why did the love potion stop working? The first question kind of implies, or maybe I'm just totally reading into it, what happened? Why did they stop loving each other? Like, that's not supposed to happen. When we talked about the first chapter, the Unbreakable Vow, I mentioned there's going to be another Unbreakable Vow. It's in book 7. When there is a marriage, and we're told specifically in the ceremony The marriage vow is unbreakable. Wow. And yet we have broken marriages scattered throughout the books. Half-Blood Prince, okay, is kind of related to that. Why did the love potion stop working? Dumbledore, guesswork. I believe Meripe, who was deeply in love with her husband, could not bear to continue enslaving him. I believe she made the choice to stop giving him the potion. Why? What did she want? She wanted him to love her, which has to be done how? Freely. Love cannot be forced. Okay? And Dumbledore says, that's enough for tonight, Harry. Harry. And this has got something to do with the prophecy, right? Uh-huh. And can I tell Ron and Hermione? He says, yes. Okay. Harry asks about the ring, which he sees. Page 211, page 216 or 217. 216, I guess. He sees on one of the tables an ugly gold ring set with a large cracked black stone. That ring, yeah. You were wearing it when we visited Slughorn. So I was. Wait, but isn't that the same ring Marvolo Gaunt showed Ogden? Very same. Have you always had it? I acquired it very recently. A few days before I came to fetch you. That would be about the time you injured your hand. Notice what Harry's doing. He's following a logical trail or breadcrumbs. Dumbledore does this intentionally. How? Good night, Harry. Okay. So, Hermione's helping hand. 12 pages in, page 221 or so. They're talking, they've been reading things in the paper, and Ron makes the comment, about Hogwarts being safer than people's homes. He says, we've got Dumbledore. I mean, he's like our savior, right? Hermione, I don't think we've got him all the time. Look, his seat's been empty as often as Hagrid's this week. So Dumbledore is going places. We don't know where and such. Okay? What is Hagrid's helping hand? Hold on a second. Yeah, I don't need to talk about that. Page 235 or so. We've only got about 2 minutes. They're back in the Gryffindor Tower, and they're talking about when they first arrived at Hogwarts, how everybody was wanded. Right? Like going through a metal detector. Hermione says, we were all searched when we arrived, weren't we? Harry, were you? I wasn't. Oh, no, of course you weren't. I forgot. You were late. Well, Finch ran over all of us with secrecy sensors when we got into the entrance hall. Any dark object would have been found. So why wasn't Harry wanted? Why didn't Snape? It's simply a plot device. She can't have Harry be wanted. Okay? Notice what they're looking for. Any dark object. Book 7. If Harry had been wanted, something would have been discovered. Okay? Which we can't really talk about. Chapter 12, Silver and Opals. Harry tries one of the spells that he finds in the back of the potions book, and it levitates Ron, and he has to stop it. Talks to Hermione about it. Hermione's, like, you shouldn't be using those spells in the book. You don't know who came up with them. Ron says, I don't know that it's important or not, but I always point it out, page 240, 41, 42, probably around page 243, 44. For the first time in the books, I believe it is. And then we're going to start hearing it more, and then even more in book 7. Ron says, thank God. I think, I'm not positive, I think it's the first reference to God anywhere in the books, with one exception. We have, I think in the first book, Hagrid speaking, and we see that. That is, it's written in Hagrid's dialect, okay? But it's not like thank God or something like that. What are the silver and opals that are being referred to? The necklace, keep going. Katie Bell touches this necklace, and she's nearly killed by it, okay? We'll stop there. We'll pick up with, even it's a little, not quite as far as I wanted to be, pick up with chapter 13 on Wednesday, and we'll try to get through, so we've got 3 more days. We'll probably try to get through, I can't stop there. Chapter 22 on Wednesday. Yeah, I think there's quite a bit we can skip. And I'll probably put a quiz up over about the first half of the book by Wednesday that will be due Sunday.